All right, so I gave this presentation when I was the president of CAPA DePaul because I think one-on-one meetings, at least for me, have been the most useful and most relational part of organizing. It's actually the first, it's actually the way I got involved in the peace movement. Actually, I was taking a class at DePaul called Organizing for Political and Social Justice when I was a freshman a couple years ago. And so sorry. And our first unit was on one-on-one meetings. And I had an assignment to find an organization in the Chicagoland area that represented my values, like it was an organization I can get behind, and reach out to their like political organizer and have a one-on-one meeting with them. And at the time, it was Hassan Al-Tayeb, who I think just spoke at the summit. He's in DC working for FCNL now, but it was a Chicago Area Peace Action, and I had a one-on-one meeting with Hassan Al-Tayeb. So here's, oh my gosh, I don't know how to advance oh, got it. Okay. So one-on-one meetings are critical to forming solid relationships and building grassroots support for your cause. People talk about it in terms of networking quite a bit, and I wouldn't personally, because networking feels more like non-relational. And I think to me at least, the most important thing in organizing spaces is building trust with other people, being, vulnerable with them. Like they need to know for sure why you have like skin in the game, essentially, like why this cause matters to you and why you're unwavering in, putting the work in to change the world around you. So one-on-one meetings is a way to do that, and also gauge interest for what your role can be in an organization, but also what, if you're like the leader of an organization, what people's role can be in an organization. So it's really important to go in with very solid intentions. Who would be important to connect with? So like, who do you want to meet with, I think is the most important thing. Who would you want to get to know? And like I said, you can be on either side of this meeting. For my one-on-one with Hassan Al-Tayeb, it was me being like, what can I do for your organization? But also when I was the president of CAPA DePaul, and it was like time to really start looking for people to fill my shoes after I graduated, it became like me reaching out to people, younger people, being like, where do you think you can fit? What leadership roles do you think you can take on? So know why you're going into it. Like, what do you want out of this person? Is really important. And think about what you want like at the end of it. Do you want this person to get more involved in your organization? Do you want to get more involved in their organization? Do you want this person to take on a leadership role? Do you want to get a better understanding of their values and motivations? I think on the American left, it's kind of our job to pull people from the middle, like people who are undecided on politics. And I think the best way you can do that is just being like very vulnerable with people and building that trust, because trust is the only way you're going to get people to come out for your cause, whatever that may be. So here's why one-on-ones are useful, and then I'll kind of talk about next what they like look like actually. So you can learn who the person you're meeting with is connected to. Like, are they like related to a congressperson? Do they have a good relationship with a congressperson that, your organization could target for whatever campaign you're working on? You can learn about their skills. Maybe they're really good at graphic design. I think organizations that have a very large variety of skill sets it's absolutely critical to organizing. Something that made, I think, CAPA DePaul very successful is we had such an array of like majors and skill sets. Like right now, Grace and Lauren are the presidents. Lauren is a computer science major, which I just thought is so cool. The president for next year is a business major. So you can learn also what they're involved in. This helps you understand how dedicated they are. Indoctrination, that's like kind of a joke, but also maybe not. No, yeah, it is, but kind of. So I think I'll use an example of Medicare for All. I've had several one-on-one meetings about Medicare for All. And I think you can really bring people into the movement by just telling them why you care about something. And for me, it's I got kicked off my health insurance when I was 14, just because my mom died and she was my only working parent. And I think it, really speaks to people that, you trust them with like this vulnerability in your life. But it really kind of, if they've had no like bad experiences with our healthcare system, which I think is rare to come by at this point in time, but it lets them know why you're there and, why you'll be committed to the cause if it's something they care about as well. So preparation, this is kind of more what a one-on-one meeting looks like. I love meeting people for coffee. I have my first one-on-one meeting this upcoming week since COVID started, because like so many people are vaccinated in Chicago now. I'm really excited. I have not had one in so long. Like, I mean, you can do it over Zoom, but it doesn't feel the same, because I like buying people coffee. I like making them feel cared for. You don't need to, but I do that. It's like just my style of it. Um, think about what you want to know about them, and like don't be afraid to be like get personal. What questions would be useful to ask them? Like set these intentions before you go. Know what you want to know from them before you get there. You don't have to write it down or anything. I feel like it makes people uncomfortable if you have like a piece of paper. It feels more like an interview. You don't want it to feel like an interview. And then setting a time and following up is like the most critical. So set a date, like on Wednesday at 5, let's meet at not Starbucks, somewhere, a local cafe. Make it a few days ahead of time, and then text them or call them the day before just to make sure they're still available, make sure that they know that you still care about meeting with them. That's really important. And then have an agenda. So introduce yourself first, of course. Why are you there? What do you care about your work? What made you get involved? And this is, I think, where you can like open up the most. But I think the best advice I ever got in one-on-one meetings that like you are initiating as an organizer, like you want to let them talk more, because it's more important that you know more about them than they know about you at this point in time. So it's their turn to talk, ask questions, and then really just kind of sit back and listen to them. And then always before you go into a one-on-one meeting, invite them, like, and know what commitment you want from them. So like if it's you want this person to join your organization, you can be like, oh, we meet on Tuesdays at 6:30. Can you come to our meeting on Tuesday at 6:30? Or like know before you go in what your ask is at the end of the meeting. Do you want them to join your org? Do you want them to commit to an action? Do you want them to like bring a couple of their friends to a protest? And if you're on the receiving, I'm sorry if you hear like an air horn. They're doing construction behind my apartment and they blow air horns all the time. So I'm so sorry if that gets distracting. If you're on the receiving end of a one-on-one meeting, you'll be asked to make a commitment typically. So just be ready for that, I guess. Here's some do's and don'ts. This is like some advice I got. I've had some that have gone longer than 45 minutes, but also you don't want the person to feel like you're just like blabbing on forever. So I usually do 30 to 45 minutes. And kind of, this isn't advice I've gotten before, just to give them a window of time. So, they have other things to do in their day, I'm assuming. Listen mostly, like I said, share your motivations and your personal stories. Like I cannot emphasize that enough. Share your personal stories. You have to make them feel like you're a real human being. Make sure you're being absolutely clear about your intentions and what you want at the end of the meeting. Don't sound like you're making a sales pitch. Just make your issues personal. Don't get too off topic, and don't come out of the meeting without a plan, without that ask being made. And then follow up again. So you do the initial follow up when you set the date and time. You text them the day before, be like, hey, Are we still good? And then after you follow up with them being like, hey, it was really nice to meet you. It was really meaningful that you shared XX whatever with me, or something that reminds them that you were like really listening to them, and thank them for their time, of course. And whatever your ask was, text them the day before, 2 days before, and be like, hey, can I still like expect you at this protest? Like, I'm really looking forward to like working with you on this, whatever it may be. So that's one-on-one meetings. I think I'll just go through the rest of my slides. I'm talking about 3 more topics, and then we can like do questions, I guess. So setting demands. Of course, you have to have demands if you are starting a new campaign or starting an organization or working on with a coalition on something. So what do you want? Like, you got to know, of course. And I just made, these are like the questions I ask myself when I'm setting demands for like an on-campus campaign, off-campus, through my work campaigns, whatever it is. So if my demands are met, who will they affect? Who will benefit from these demands being met? That's so important to ask, because then you know who to bring into the work. You know, I love working with a bunch of people. Like, I love working in coalition with other organizations. I think it's so awesome. It's just so like fulfilling. So who do you want to bring in? And is my demand realistic, but also inspiring? Because you don't want your demand to be like nothing will fundamentally change if it's met. Like, you want people to be affected by that change. You want people's the goal of organizing is, you know, make people's lives better in whatever way that may mean to you. Is my demand realistic but also inspiring? Like, you want people to be like, oh my god, I could fuck with that. I'm sorry. If they could get with it. So realistic but inspiring. Who would care about this demand being met? So like, who has skin in the game? And related to this, like, who would not want you to have your demand met? Like, think about your opposition, of course, all the time. Like, what is their next move going to be? Because as an organizer, I've always found it more useful to be proactive rather than reactive. So who would care about your demand being met? And then who would benefit, of course. Who can meet your demand? So who are you directing your demand at? If it's like a petition, if it's a protest, who are you making your demands to? That's like critical, because who has the actual power to affect change in that way? Is it the president of your university? Is it your mayor? Is it someone on the city council? Is it someone in Congress? Is it the president? And is this person in your reach? Like, do you have their contact information? Is it someone you think you could actually get to with a certain level of campaigning? And do you want to use 2 or 3 tier demands? So you can have one demand, that's fine. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. Like when DePaul, one of DePaul's professors came out with this really Islamophobic, anti-Palestinian article in the Federalist, I think. We started a campaign to have the university censure him, because all of his articles are like, oh, Jason Hill is a professor at DePaul. Our demand was the university censure him. That was like one of the demands. You can have one demand, or a lot of the times, especially for CODEPINK, I use tiered demands. So basically, like, for example, if you want an athlete to boycott an event or make a statement at an event in a certain country, you could say to whatever athlete that may be, I want you to boycott or make a statement at the sporting event in this country, because, you know, the country's committing human rights violations, the country's bombing and starving Yemen, etc. So the perk of that is you're setting a demand higher than what you are actually looking for. So they may see a boycott and they'll be like, oh my god, I'm not going to do that, but I could make a statement. And especially if they have done things like that before, it's useful to use 2 or 3 tier demands, in my opinion, but you don't have to. I think it's fine. It's just a tactic. So setting goals. This is a little different than setting demands, because I think you'll have one demand throughout a campaign typically, or a couple, but you have like a million goals. So how do you set realistic and motivating goals for a campaign? So avoid being too broad. Like, for example, I don't like capitalism. I would not like to live under capitalism. I would like it destroyed, but might be too lofty of a goal for a campaign, though. When I was like young and just experiencing my like political awakening or whatever, I was like, how can I actually change anything? Like, all of the things that make me upset are too big and too broad for like me to affect change with. And it was only when I like took that organizing class at DePaul where I was like, oh, like I just gotta be more specific. Like, you can take on the machine at like bits and pieces and have it be really successful. And so this using SMART goals was really important to me as an organizer. I still use them all the time. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And I'll just give everyone an example of one that we used at CAPA DePaul. We wanted to get more members at our meetings weekly. So specific is we want more people to come to our Tuesday night meetings. Measurable, our question was, how many more people do we want? So I think we came to like 10, like 5 or 10. I don't remember. It was like, it was a couple years ago. Or achievable, and achievable. So, of course, I would love to have 100 million CAPA DePaul members coming to every meeting. But that, it's just not, there's not even that many students at DePaul. So what's achievable? Like, how many people can you genuinely get to make a weekly commitment to? And if we have, I think we had about 10 to 15 members at the time, getting to 20, that's like, there are people that care about issues of peace, they'll come, you know what I mean? So relevant, why does it matter? This is like time to reflect on why it matters to your like overall organizational efforts. We needed more people to help with campaigns we were working on, etc. And time bound. So it helps to have goals that are time bound, not just for like pressure, but for focus, I think. So I think that the deadline we came to when we were making that goal was like end of spring quarter. So it gives us like 10 weeks to get 5 people or 10 people, how many, whatever it was. So you give yourself a deadline, and of course, like, you're not always going to meet deadlines, and that's fine. It just kind of gives you a guidance, and then make sure that like time-bound goal is also achievable, not just your specific and measurable goal. Like, also time-bound has to be like, you can't get 5 members by the end of tomorrow. You know what I mean? So here's another example. Right now, there is a campaign in Chicago being worked on by CODEPINK and I think World Beyond War. You want your city to divest from the war machine. You don't want your city investing any more money into Honeywell, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, etc. How do you make this into a SMART goal? That's like such a lofty idea, right? Like, you don't even know if they're invested in Honeywell at this point, at the very beginning of your campaign. Keep in mind that one campaign can take so many SMART goals, like so many. So here's just some questions to like ask yourself. Where does a divestment campaign start? What do you need to know first? Like, is there any like evidence that your city is invested? Like, there are, like, so many cities are, so it's safe to assume, but you need to know. So if you need to know the city is investing in weapons companies, before you ask them to divest, make a SMART goal for research. So have like a research cohort, a group of people who are working on this. Like by the end of next week, we want to have some idea of where this information can be found. Do we need to, that this will lead you to other things like, oh, we need to submit a FOIA because we need to use the Freedom of Information Act to find out what our tax dollars are being used for. So let's say you found that a certain city fund is invested in the military industrial complex, and you will find that quite a bit in so many cities. What now? And then you can make a SMART goal for action. Do you want to have a petition? Do you want to have a protest? And this is where you can kind of like work into setting demands, and you can, I think research is a little bit harder. It's definitely doable and necessary to set a SMART goal for research, but it's easier when you kind of get into this phase of a campaign to set a SMART goal for petition signatures. We need 10,000 by the end of whatever month, you know. And then what I typically do is let one completion of a goal lead you to the next goal. You don't have to have all of them at once. Like organizing is very, it's, I think, a natural process for us to want to make our lives better, right? So it's better to approach organizing in a very organic way. So let one goal lead you to the next one, because you don't know where the first goal is going to go. You might find nothing. You might find everything in your research phase. And the last thing I'll talk about, and then we can kind of move into more of a conversation, is coalition building. Like I said, I love working with coalitions. I love working with other orgs. And I think this is the hardest part about organizing, in my opinion. I find it really hard. I find it really easy to be like vulnerable and build trust with people, in my experience. I find it easy to like know what I want now as an organizer leading a campaign. But I think every organization could get better at coalition building. Like, I just think the American left can get better at working with each other on things. So working with other organizations on one project or in a long-term movement, you know, like in the end, if you're an organization on the American left, you're kind of working towards the same goal as each other in general. So it's important to stay connected with people. And here are just some tips that I've, we didn't talk about this in like my organizing class, and I think that these are some lessons I've learned like working at CODEPINK over the last few months. You know, issues that I've run into working with other organizations. So knowing your organizational strengths. What are you good at? Like what is your organization good at? Are you really good at getting the grassroots mobilized? Are you really good at getting people to things? Can you mobilize like the people in your network to show up to actions, to share petitions? Is your organization really good on social media? Do you have a bunch of followers? Can you, you know, spread the message on social media? Do you have amazing writers? Do you have people who are good at dealing with media, like news media? Like really take inventory of what you're good at, because if you don't know what your organizational strengths are, then when you go into coalition building, you don't like, I feel like when I didn't really know what my strengths were as an organizer, I didn't know what to offer people. Like I kind of took on a bunch of things without really taking inventory of where I'd be useful. And I think that can, in coalition work, it can lead to a lot of burnout. So really take inventory of yourself and your organizational strengths, and then understand other organizational strengths also. So like, and you don't have to know this right away. You don't have to know what other orgs you've never met or worked with are good at. But if you have like an initial meeting, take time out of that meeting to take inventory of what they think they are good at and what they know they're good at, if you don't know already. So I've noticed that something I do now is I like literally take notes. Like I have like a Google Doc, like what are other organizations in my coalition useful for? So I always know when I'm calling them into projects, that I know where they can be reliable. And also the most important, like I think it might be more important than, no, it's all important. Commitments, like knowing when to commit and when not to commit. Because if you're in a coalition, like you said, trust is so important on the interpersonal level and on the organizational level. If you commit to something you can't follow through with 100%, like that is going to ultimately harm your relationship. Of course, it can be mended and fixed. It's not the end of the world. But you want to be a reliable partner, and because that it gets reciprocated, and it builds trust with people. So at that like initial meeting as an entire coalition of orgs, take inventory of skills and commitments. Like, is your plate full? Like, if your plate's full, maybe like this isn't something you can take on, and that's fine. And always be transparent about your commitments. Like, if you can't commit to something 100%, be honest. Like, be like, my organization, I am at capacity. I can do this one thing. I can do these two things, and I know I can do them well. I say on the side, do two things really well rather than doing a million things poorly. I think, especially student organizers have like this I had this problem in college. I just said yes to everything, and I really I overworked myself, at least to burnout, and it can cause a bunch of other problems in your organizing. So you don't want that. Like, just be honest. People appreciate transparency and honesty. And set up a Google group or Google Doc. You can have a group chat instead of a Google group, obviously. They're helpful for planning things that don't require meetings. And especially during COVID, like coalitions love to have meetings all the time on Zoom. And I don't think it's all necessary, to be honest. I think some things can be an email and some things can happen in a group chat. Because you don't want people to get burned out. You want people to feel like you are taking their time seriously. And then have one master Google Doc for the entire project, entire thing. People's roles, their responsibilities, their skills, everything. What time something's happening, who's on like police duty for a protest, have everything in one place, because everyone, I feel, if you've organized anything ever, like at the last 2 days, people are scrambling, they have a million questions. There can be one Google Doc to answer all of those questions for people. And that's always been very useful for me. And then share resources. I don't know what's up with people gatekeeping resources they have from people who are like working on the same mission that they are. But yeah, share resources with your comrades. If they're your comrades, give them what they need, and they will, in turn do the same. Yeah, I think that's the end of my presentation. But yeah, those just Activism 101, I guess, if anyone has any questions. I'm still new at this. I don't really feel qualified to be speaking here today, but yeah, I don't know. Thank you all for coming. We have like 10 more minutes, so please fire them off. And thank you, Sierra, for all your laugh reacts. It's early, isn't it?
Please feel free to ask as of this time. We have about 13 more minutes.
Oh, you're muted, Catherine.
I would love to see one of your Google Docs. If you have an old one that you could show us, how do you track everything?
Yeah.
I've never done that part. I probably should learn how to do it.
Let me look for one. I know I have one from a Yemen protest that happened recently. Chicago Action something. Anniversary, I think.
So if a campaign has, say, 3 different pieces to it, do you keep it all on one Google Doc, or do you keep each piece on a Google Doc? I mean, how refined do you do that?
Yeah. I think it's like, it really depends on the situation, but you can separate it by sections too. Like if you're like, oh, this section of the document is for the protest that's happening, this one is for what our meetings look like. Like I typically, if I'm working on a long-term project, I keep all the meeting notes on the same doc that I.
Wow.
What is this? I'm trying to find it. One sec. Oh, nope, that's not it. But does that answer your question? I'll keep looking for it.
Yeah, I need to work on that because I tend to be making notes on all kinds of pieces of paper, and then I have to figure out pulling them together later. And I'm thinking I should probably figure out how to do this in a more organized way.
Okay, I found it. Let me share my screen. Okay, this is from a vigil that we had in Chicago. So time, dates, when the speaker should arrive is here, our demands, our supplies, like who's bringing what. Our schedule is on the same thing. And our speeches were also on the same document with like
Oh, nice.
a full agenda. Typically I have a little bit more than that. I have roles typically up top also. So like who is in charge of talking to the police, who is marshaling a protest, that kind of thing.
Well, looks really good.
Thank you.
Need to try to do that. Thank you for your presentation.
Of course. Simona says Paul has a question. Oh yeah, go ahead. Or sorry, Paul first.
Yes, thank you. I do appreciate the sort of view you take in a primacy of relational before transactional. But I'm just wondering about how we get to transactional. In my experience, I've been working in this field for forever, 40, 50 years. And I'm wondering if you are familiar with Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication theories.
I'm not.
Okay. The theory is very simple. What it says is if you're going to get into the game of demands and accusations and blame and things like this, you're going to get into confirmation bias. In other words, a person is going to get a little bit defensive because by virtue of the fact that you have a demand, you're accusing them of being deficient in that particular area. And a confirmation bias is like, for example, the death penalty. If you believe strongly in the death penalty and somebody makes an argument for the death penalty, you're validated. If somebody makes an argument against the death penalty, your confirmation bias arises, you're defensive, and you're further validated by being defensive. So you've got to look at how we change people there. I would suggest that process, and you've got a lot of process there, is very, very much secondary to language. For example, if you wanted to divest from the war machine, and you know that there are strong interests, corporate interests there, you're probably taking on the problem at the hardest point you could possibly take it on. In what the response is going to be regarding this confirmation bias. If you were to take it on in a different way, to approach a city and say, we would like you to join, for example, the International Cities of Peace movement, let's start something there. And then as you work that sort of field and construct, you can start bringing in some of your concerns and issues. So I would be very, very careful because demands are going to imply, or they could imply, very much a crimes and punishment kind of mindset, rather than a good order and harmony type of mindset. And those are two different conversations that one can have in nonviolent communication. You know, how can we live together here? Or, you know, how can we put people in jail? There's a very, very subtle thing. But Marshall Rosenberg talks about things where, for example, there's only a 4-step process. It's really simple. You state the facts without any judgment whatsoever. You don't judge yourself or others. You make no demands, threats, insults, or blame. You don't attribute my feelings to everybody kind of thing. You state your own feelings about the matter, you know, how you feel about it. If there's been, say, a killing, there has been a killing. This is how I feel about it. It's heartbreaking. Then you express your needs, for example, you know, I need to be compassionate about this. I need to resolve this. And then the last thing is a sort of engagement. How can we work together to resolve this issue so that the outcome benefits public order and good and harmony or something like this? It benefits both of us. So you've entered into a conversation that's going to be cooperative rather than an undercurrent of adversarial kind of thing. Now, that's not to say, and I got 33 years in the military, Canadian military, and we've done this stuff everywhere. And you've got to kind of realize the culture that's underneath it. And I do know that the predisposition to default to power, you know, whatever power you may have in doing this, is very, very strong. So, and the need to change them rather than the need to have a relationship with them that deals with a shared interest. So that's all I would really say, and it might add to something that you can think about. So
Yeah.
there is nonviolent communication, and there's also peace-centered communication, and there's various iterations of this that you might want to consider.
What's Marshall Rosenberg's piece called?
Nonviolent communication. You put it in your browser, nonviolent communications, Marshall Rosenberg, Marshall with 2 L's at the end.
Okay, sweet. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Yeah.
It's very, very seminal to peace services and conflict resolution.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Ted, I think you had a question.
Yes, I did. You got me when you mentioned, you said turning liberals to leftists, and then you had a little LOL kind of laughing. And I'd like to pursue that a bit because, you know, I hate to be pessimistic, but it's very, very difficult to get anyone to really change their mind from one far extreme to the other far extreme. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So the piece on one-on-one meetings, that presentation I actually put together while I was at school at DePaul when I was the president of CAPA and doing like, when we started working on like campaigns with other orgs, I was like, okay, I need to like teach one-on-one meetings to the people in CAPA. So when I made that presentation, a lot of the people who were in CAPA at the time, CAPA DePaul specifically, we had this like joke, we had this bingo card where you filled in a bingo square if you joined CAPA DePaul as a liberal and came out as like an anti-capitalist. Like it happened to a bunch of them, a bunch of the people who joined. So I think that was more for like college students, like people who might be more malleable and are like still in the process of their political education, I think. But I don't know, I was canvassing in Iowa also in 2020, and I had a lot of really great conversations with like middle-aged people. So I think that's where being relational comes in. I think that's where sharing your stories comes in, because I had this interaction. Oh, thank you, Simona, for the time check. We have 4 minutes. I'll try and tell this story fast. This Trump supporter, I like knocked on his door because he was on the canvassing thing, and I was like, oh shit. But you know, I told him about like why I was canvassing, who I was canvassing for, and I was like, I told him a story about me losing my health insurance, and I've been on and off health insurance since I was 14. Like I said, my mom died. She was my only working parent. I had a disabled brother. My whole family lost our health insurance when my mom died. So, and he was like, I just don't think he ever thought about it in that way. I don't think he was like ever questioning what was going on, because he told me, he shared with me that he was like, my daughter has diabetes and I like can't afford her insulin sometimes.
Right.
And like, how am I as a father like not able to get something that my daughter like needs to survive, like needs to live? Like I'm her father, I'm supposed to provide for her, whatever. And he came out to caucus for, maybe I won't say who, no, I'll say it, Bernie, later that day. So, you know, I think there are some people you won't be able to move. That's just how it is. But, and I think you can clock that pretty fast when you're talking to someone. If they're never going to change their mind, then just don't waste your precious time. You know, time is precious. So.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
That was a great example.
Thank you. 2 minutes. So I just want to thank you all for being here. I was really nervous to speak. I've never given like a presentation like this before. I'm 21 and feel very underqualified. So
no, you went from DePaul right to CODEPINK. I was so impressed with that.
Oh, thank you.
So
thank
cool.
You.
I mean, CODEPINK is just amazing, you know.
Yeah,
so
they're great. I love them.
You found the right home for yourself.
Thank you so much.
We sign every petition you send to us.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
I don't know if you actually realize how much we love CODEPINK. I mean,
Oh, we should, if you
honestly,
were
it's
all in
beyond, it's
Chicago.
beyond measure. I find myself thinking, oh my God, I hope my wife is not jealous, because you guys are truly amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'd love to connect with you more. My email is my name @codepink.org. Feel free to email me anytime. And I think Simone is calling people back into the main session. Thank you all. You were so kind and so amazing. And I have Marshall Rosenberg's.
Yes, we all took that note. Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Enjoy the summit.
All right, thank you.
Bye, David.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.